There is a specific kind of person who remembers recording songs off the radio by pressing play and record at exactly the right moment, and also remembers the first time they downloaded a song illegally and felt like they were living in the future. If you were born somewhere between 1977 and 1985, you already know exactly what that felt like. And you probably also know the strange feeling of not quite belonging to any generation that gets talked about. You were too young to be fully Gen X, too old to be a real millennial. And every time someone posts a generational meme, you sit there thinking, that is kind of me, but also kind of not me at all. Psychologists and sociologists started using the word Xennial around 2014 to describe this micro-generation, not because the label matters, but because what happened to people born in that specific window is genuinely interesting when you examine it through a psychological lens. And that is exactly what we are going to do today. You grew up in a world that was quiet in a way that no longer exists. Not quiet as in peaceful necessarily. Quiet as in there was simply less noise competing for your attention at every single moment. You had a childhood where boredom was regular, long summers with nothing planned, afternoons where you had to physically go to your friend's house to find out if they were home. Hours spent doing absolutely nothing productive by modern standards. Research on childhood development consistently shows that unstructured time, what we now call boredom, is one of the most important ingredients for developing creativity, emotional regulation, and independent thinking. When children have nothing to do, they are forced to generate their own internal world. They learn to sit with discomfort. They learn to solve problems nobody handed to them. They develop a self that is not dependent on external stimulation to function. You got all of that completely by accident, simply because the technology that would have stolen that time from you had not been invented yet. But here's what makes your experience different from the generations that came before you. You did not stay in that quiet world. Right as you were crossing into adulthood, somewhere between your late teens and mid-20s, the entire technological landscape transformed almost overnight. The internet arrived and mobile phones appeared, then social media and then smartphones. And unlike the generations older than you, who encountered this shift as fully formed adults with established identities and habits, you were still in the middle of becoming yourself when all of this happened. This timing is everything. Neuroscience tells us that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for identity formation, decision-making, adapting to new information, and building complex mental frameworks, is not fully developed until around age 25. A landmark study published in Nature Neuroscience confirmed that this maturation process extends well into the mid-20s. What this means for you specifically is that your brain was still in its highest period of plasticity and adaptability when the technological revolution happened. You were not too young to remember the world before, but you were young enough that the new world felt completely natural to absorb. You did not have to learn technology the way you learn a foreign language as an adult, slowly, consciously, always slightly awkward. You absorbed it the way children absorb language, naturally, fluently, without effort. This created something psychologists find genuinely rare, a kind of cognitive bilingualism. You can operate fluently in both analog and digital worlds without either one feeling foreign. You remember what it felt like to make plans and simply trust that people would show up. No confirmation text, no last-minute cancellation via WhatsApp. You agreed to meet somewhere on Saturday, and you were there because that was the only option. That required a completely different kind of social trust and personal accountability than most interactions look like today. But you also adapted to the connected world without friction. You figured out every new platform, every new device, every shift in how communication worked, because your brain was perfectly positioned to do exactly that, competing for your attention. But you gained connection, information, and possibilities your younger self couldn't have imagined. If you're a Xennial, you probably feel that you don't quite fit in anywhere. Too young for some things and too old for others, caught between two worlds. It's not a fault. That's actually the defining feature of your generation's experience. In a world that keeps changing faster than anyone can predict, having lived through one massive transition might be one of the most valuable things you could have learned. You've adapted to a transitional lifestyle. The environment in which you were raised does not necessarily have to be the environment in which you live forever. The Xennial experience is worth knowing about because of that more than anything else, not because you're special in some superior way, but because you lived through a specific moment in history that taught you something the rest of us are still trying to figure out: how to adapt without losing yourself in the process. If this resonated with you, I would really appreciate you subscribing, and if you want to help me keep making content like this, consider becoming a channel member. Your support genuinely means a lot. I've got some other videos queued up that I think you'll connect with, different topics but the same kind of depth. I'll see you in the next one.